The echo of gunshots reverberated through the cabin walls as Jessie Bennett clutched her newborn daughter to her chest, her heart pounding with such ferocity she thought it might burst from her ribcage. Arizona Territory, 1878, a place where law was still a distant concept and survival depended on grit and sometimes mercy from strangers. "Hand over the baby, lady," the tallest of the three bandits demanded, his face obscured by a dirty bandana, only his cold eyes visible above the fabric. "Boss wants it. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Jessie's throat constricted with terror. She'd heard whispers of baby snatchers, desperate childless couples who paid bandits handsomely for newborns, no questions asked. 2 weeks postpartum and alone, her husband buried just months before her delivery, she had no defense against these men. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "She's all I have." The second bandit, a wiry man with a pockmarked face, stepped forward and wrenched the swaddled infant from her arms while the third held Jessie back. Her baby's startled wail pierced the night as they backed toward the door. "Why are you doing this?" Jessie screamed, fighting against her captor's grip. "Money," the tall one said simply. "Rich folks up north pay good for healthy white babies. Yours'll fetch a fine price. I'll find you." Jessie's voice broke as they mounted their horses, her precious daughter now secured to the leader's chest with a length of rope. "I'll never stop looking," the tall one laughed. "Lady, by the time you reach the nearest town, we'll be long gone. Forget the child, she ain't yours no more." As their hoofbeats faded into the darkness, Jessie collapsed to her knees in the dusty yard, her nightgown billowing around her in the cool desert breeze. She had no horse, no weapon, not even proper clothes. The nearest settlement, Gila Bend, was 15 miles across harsh terrain. But there was no choice. Stumbling to her feet, she raced inside the cabin, throwing on her only dress and boots, her breasts aching with milk meant for her stolen child. She grabbed the knife her husband had left her and her last few dollars. There was no time to pack food or water. Heading in the direction the bandits had taken, guided only by starlight, Jessie pushed her still healing body beyond endurance. Every step sent pain radiating through her, but the image of her daughter's tiny face kept her moving forward. By dawn, she had covered only a few miles, her legs trembling with exhaustion. On the horizon, a plume of dust caught her attention, a lone rider heading in her direction. Terror and hope warred within her as she stood in the middle of the trail, waving her arms desperately. The rider slowed his approach, his hand moving to rest on the pistol at his hip, a natural precaution in these lawless parts. As he drew closer, Jessie could make out a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weathered face beneath the brim of his Stetson. "Madam." He called out, keeping a cautious distance. "You all right?" "They took my baby," Jessie blurted, her voice cracking with desperation. "3 bandits headed north. Please, I need help." The stranger's expression darkened as he took in her disheveled appearance and the wild panic in her eyes. "When?" "Last night. Please, there's no time, get on," he said, extending his hand down to her. "Name's Thomas Everett. Most folks call me Tom." With strength she didn't know she still possessed, Jessie grasped his hand and pulled herself up behind him on the horse. As they set off at a gallop, she clung to his waist, her tears dampening the back of his duster. "I can track them," he said over his shoulder, his voice carrying a quiet confidence that gave her the first flicker of hope. "Been trailing a gang matching their description for 2 weeks now. They've been hitting isolated homesteads all through the territory." "Why are you after them?" Jessie asked, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Tom was silent for a long moment. "They took something from me too." They rode hard for an hour before Tom reined in his horse at a fork in the trail. He dismounted swiftly, examining the ground with a practiced eye. Jessie watched as he crouched, running his fingers over faint indentations in the dirt. 3 horses heading northeast, he confirmed, his voice grim. "Riding heavy." "That's them," Jessie said, sliding down from the saddle despite her exhaustion. "Please, we have to hurry." Tom looked at her fully for the first time, taking in her pale face and the dark circles under her red-rimmed eyes. "You just had that baby, didn't you?" She nodded, wrapping her arms protectively around her middle. 2 weeks ago, His jaw tightened. "You shouldn't be riding. You're liable to tear something inside." "I don't care," Jessie said fiercely. "That's my daughter they've taken. I'll die before I abandon her." Something shifted in Tom's expression, a flicker of admiration, perhaps, or recognition of a spirit as determined as his own. "We'll catch them," he said quietly. "And when we do, those men won't see another sunrise. That's a promise." He offered her his canteen, and she drank gratefully, the water easing her parched throat. "Thank you," she whispered. Tom nodded, helping her back onto the horse. "Save your strength. It's going to be a long day." As they continued their pursuit, Jessie learned that Tom was a former Texas Ranger who now worked as a bounty hunter. The men they were following had murdered a family near Tucson, friends of his, leaving only a young boy orphaned. "Marshal Angela Bend deputized me to bring them in," he explained as they paused to rest the horse in the heat of midday. "Been on their trail ever since." "And now they've taken my Elizabeth," Jessie said, her voice hollow with grief. "My husband James died before she was born, rockfall in the silver mine. She's all I have left." Tom's eyes softened with sympathy. "We'll get her back, Mrs. Bennett." "Jessie," she corrected him. "Please call me Jessie." As the sun began its descent, they came upon a makeshift camp hidden in a stand of mesquite. Tom dismounted quickly, motioning for Jessie to stay back as he drew his Colt revolver. "They've moved on already," he said after carefully approaching the site. "But they were here not more than an hour ago." Jessie hurried forward despite his warning, scanning the ground desperately for any sign of her baby. A discarded cloth caught her eye, the blanket she had wrapped Elizabeth in. She snatched it up, pressing it to her face and inhaling the fading scent of her child. "She was alive," she whispered, tears of relief stinging her eyes. "They fed her." She pointed to a tin cup with traces of goat's milk still clinging to its sides. Tom nodded grimly. "They won't harm her." Like they said, damaged goods don't fetch a good price. "Where are they taking her?" "If I had to guess, either to Prescott or all the way to Flagstaff," Tom replied, studying the remains of the campfire. "There are wealthy mining executives in both places with wives who can't bear children. They pay good money for babies, no questions asked." Jessie's knees buckled and Tom caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy now," he murmured, his strong hands steadying her. "We're gaining on them. They don't know we're following, so they're not pushing hard." "I can't lose her," Jessie whispered, clutching the blanket to her chest. "You won't," Tom promised, his voice low and fierce. "Now come on, we can make a few more miles before dark." They traveled until the last light faded from the sky, finally stopping in a sheltered arroyo. Tom built a small fire, careful to keep it low enough not to be spotted from a distance. He produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags, offering them to Jessie. "Eat," he urged when she hesitated. "You need your strength." As they sat in the flickering firelight, Jessie studied her unlikely savior. Thomas Everett was not a handsome man in the conventional sense, but his face held character, deep lines around his eyes speaking of long days under the sun, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of the Arizona sky at dusk. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "You could have handed me over to the marshal in Gila Bend and continued on your own." Tom looked up from the fire, his expression unreadable. "Some wrongs can't be ignored, Mrs. Bennett. Taking a child from its mother." He shook his head. "That crosses a line. You have children of your own." She ventured. A shadow passed over his face. "Had a son. He and my wife died of fever 5 years back." "I'm sorry," Jessie whispered, understanding now the depth of his determination. Tom nodded once in acknowledgement, then stood abruptly. "You should rest. I'll take first watch." Jessie wanted to object. Her baby was still out there, but exhaustion was overtaking her. Her body, still recovering from childbirth, ached in ways she hadn't known possible. Reluctantly, she wrapped herself in the blanket Tom offered and closed her eyes, her hand still clutching Elizabeth's baby blanket. She woke to Tom's hand on her shoulder, his voice urgent in her ear. "Riders coming. Stay down." In the pale pre-dawn light, Jessie could make out 3 figures moving slowly along the trail below them. One of them carried a small bundle. Her heart leapt into her throat. "It's them," she whispered, starting to rise. Tom pushed her back gently but firmly. Wait, let them pass, we'll follow. But trust me, he murmured, his eyes never leaving the bandits. If we confront them here, your baby could be caught in the crossfire. Better to wait until they make camp. The logic was sound, but every maternal instinct in Jessie's body screamed to run after her child. Only Tom's steadying presence kept her hidden until the bandits disappeared around a bend. They're moving slow, Tom observed as they mounted his horse once more. That's good. The baby's probably slowing them down, or they're confident no one's following, Jessie said bitterly. They maintained a cautious distance, Tom's tracking skills allowing them to follow without being detected. By midday, the terrain had changed, becoming more rugged as they climbed into the foothills. The bandits were clearly heading toward Prescott. Late in the afternoon, as they rounded a rocky outcropping, Tom suddenly pulled his horse to a stop. Ahead, the bandits had halted beside a small spring, dismounting to water their horses. "This is it," Tom said quietly, sliding from the saddle and helping Jessie down. "Stay behind me." He led her through the scrub brush until they were within hearing distance of the outlaws. From their position, Jessie could see her daughter, now unwrapped from her blanket, squirming in the arms of the youngest bandit. "Shut that brat up," the tall one snapped. "Last thing we need is for someone to hear." "I'm trying," the younger man replied nervously, awkwardly bouncing the increasingly distressed infant. "Maybe she's hungry again." "Then feed her," the leader growled. "We need her alive when we get to Prescott." As the bandits argued, Tom turned to Jessie, his expression grave. "I'm going to circle around and come at them from the other side. When the shooting starts, stay down." Terror seized her heart. "The baby, I won't let anything happen to her," Tom promised, "but I need you to trust me." Jessie nodded, though her entire body trembled with fear. Tom squeezed her hand once, then disappeared into the brush, moving silently as only a man who'd spent his life in the wilderness could. The minutes stretched endlessly as Jessie watched the bandits, her eyes never leaving her daughter. Elizabeth's cries had subsided to whimpers as the youngest outlaw fed her from a makeshift bottle. Suddenly, Tom's voice rang out from the opposite side of the clearing. "U.S. Marshal, throw down your weapons." The bandits reacted instantly, diving for cover and drawing their guns. The one holding Elizabeth rolled behind a boulder, the baby clutched awkwardly under his arm. The first shots came from the leader, firing blindly in Tom's direction. Tom returned fire with deadly precision, and the tall bandit crumpled to the ground, a dark stain spreading across his chest. The second outlaw, the wiry man with the pockmarked face, began firing wildly, bullets splintering the rocks near where Jessie was hidden. She pressed herself flatter against the ground, her heart hammering. Another shot from Tom's position, and the second bandit fell, clutching his throat. "Give it up," Tom shouted to the remaining outlaw. "You're done, I got the baby," the young bandit called back, his voice cracking with panic. "You come any closer and He never finished the sentence." A shot rang out and the bandit slumped forward. For one horrifying moment, Jessie thought Elizabeth had been hit, but then she saw Tom emerging from his position, his gun still raised. "It's clear," he called to her. Jessie sprinted from her hiding place, racing toward the fallen bandit. Tom reached him first, carefully lifting Elizabeth from his limp arms. The baby was wailing now, her tiny face red with distress. "Elizabeth," Jessie cried, taking her daughter into her arms at last. She sank to her knees, cradling the infant against her chest, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Oh, my baby, my sweet baby." Tom stood over them, his expression a mixture of relief and grim satisfaction. "They're finished," he said quietly. "They won't hurt anyone else." Jessie looked up at him through her tears. "You saved her. You saved us both." Tom holstered his weapon and knelt beside her. "She looks like she came through all right." Elizabeth had quieted, her tiny fingers curling around one of Jessie's as she nuzzled against her mother's chest. "She's hungry," Jessie said, her voice thick with emotion. Tom nodded, standing to give her privacy. "I'll check the bandits' supplies, see what we can use. Then we should move on. It's not safe to stay here." As Jessie fed her daughter, relief washing over her in waves, she watched Tom moving efficiently around the clearing. He collected the bandits' weapons and ammunition, as well as their canteens and saddlebags. One of their horses had bolted during the gunfire, but the other two remained, tethered to a nearby tree. "We can take their horses," Tom said when he returned. "Make better time back to Gila Bend." "Gila Bend?" Jessie asked, surprised. "But my cabin is too isolated," Tom finished for her. "These men might have partners. It's not safe for you to return there, not right away." The realization that her ordeal wasn't truly over hit Jessie with unexpected force. "I have nowhere else to go," she admitted, her voice small. "No family, no friends close by." Tom was silent for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful as he looked at her and Elizabeth. "I have a place," he said finally. "Small ranch outside Gila Bend. It's nothing fancy, but it's secure. You could stay there until we're sure you're safe." Jessie stared at him, overwhelmed by the offer. "I couldn't impose. It's no imposition," Tom cut her off gently. "I wouldn't offer if I didn't mean it." As the sun began to set, they buried the bandits in shallow graves, not out of respect but necessity. Tom said a brief, perfunctory prayer over them, more habit than sentiment. They traveled slowly back toward Gila Bend, making camp each night with one eye always open. Tom fashioned a sling for Elizabeth from one of his spare shirts, allowing Jessie to carry her securely while riding. Each time they stopped, he ensured Jessie had privacy to feed and tend to her daughter, keeping a respectful distance yet always vigilant. On the third day, they arrived at Tom's ranch as dusk was falling. It was indeed small, a sturdy cabin with a corral and barn, but to Jessie, it looked like sanctuary. "It's not much," Tom said as he helped her down from her horse, "but it's solid. No one will bother you here." Inside, the cabin was spare but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom off to one side, and a lean-to kitchen. Tom immediately set about building a fire while Jessie settled Elizabeth on the bed. "You take the bedroom," Tom said, not looking up from his task. "I'll sleep out here." "I can't take your bed," Jessie protested. "You're not taking it, I'm offering it," he replied matter-of-factly. "You and the little one need it more than I do." As the days passed, they fell into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. Tom worked his small herd of cattle during the days, repaired fences, and hunted for their meals. Jessie kept house, cooking and cleaning with Elizabeth either in her arms or sleeping nearby. In the evenings, they sat before the fire, talking little at first but gradually sharing more of their lives. Jessie told him about growing up in Missouri, about meeting James when he came through her town looking for men to join him in the Arizona silver fields, about their whirlwind courtship and the hard journey west. "He was a good man," she said softly one evening, a week into their stay. "Not perfect but good. He would have been a wonderful father." Tom nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Life out here has a way of taking good men too soon." In turn, he shared stories of his time as a Texas Ranger, of the wildness of the frontier before even the tenuous civilization that existed now. He spoke briefly of his wife, Sarah, and their son, William, the pain of their loss still evident in his voice. "After they died, I couldn't stay in that house," he admitted. "Too many memories, so I drifted, took the badge when it was offered, seemed as good a way as any to keep going." "And now?" Jessie asked, looking around the cabin that was clearly a permanent home, not a drifter's temporary shelter. Tom shrugged. "A man gets tired of drifting eventually, wanted a place of my own again." 2 weeks stretched into a month. Tom rode into Gila Bend occasionally for supplies and to check with the marshal about any news of other bandits in the area. Each time he returned, Jessie felt a rush of relief that surprised her with its intensity. One evening, as she was putting Elizabeth down for the night, Tom appeared in the bedroom doorway, his expression unusually serious. "Marshall says there have been reports of more kidnappings north of here," he said quietly. "Similar pattern, could be connected to the men we dealt with." Fear clutched at Jessie's heart as she looked down at her sleeping daughter. "You think they might come here?" "No," Tom said firmly. "No one knows you're here, but—" He hesitated. "I've been thinking your cabin, we should go back, get anything you want to keep, then sell it." The suggestion took her by surprise. "Sell it? You said yourself there's nothing for you there," Tom pointed out gently. "Just bad memories now." And it's not safe, not for a woman alone with a child. Where would I go? Jessie asked, though she already knew the answer she hoped to hear. Tom looked away, suddenly seeming almost shy. You could stay here, permanently. Her heart skipped a beat. Tom. I know it's forward, he said quickly. And I'm not asking for anything improper. The cabin's big enough for both of us to have our space. Elizabeth seems happy here, and he met her eyes again. I've grown accustomed to having you both around. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even a proposal, but coming from a man as reserved as Thomas Everett, it spoke volumes. I've grown accustomed to being here, Jessie admitted softly. With you. Something changed between them after that night, a subtle shift in how they moved around each other, a new awareness. Their hands would brush when passing dishes at dinner. Their eyes would meet and hold a moment longer than necessary. The air in the cabin seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. A week later, they rode back to Jessie's abandoned cabin. The journey was tense, both of them watchful for any sign of danger. Elizabeth, now nearly 2 months old, was securely bundled against Jessie's chest, sleeping peacefully despite the motion of the horse. The cabin stood silent and undisturbed, dust having settled over everything inside. Jessie moved through the rooms, collecting the few precious items she couldn't bear to leave behind. James's pocket watch, their wedding photograph, a quilt her mother had made. As she packed these treasures, Tom examined the property with a practical eye. Land's good, he observed. Someone will buy it, maybe that family that just arrived in Gila Bend looking to settle. Jessie nodded, running her hand over the rough-hewn table where she and James had shared their meals. It seems like another lifetime, she murmured, being here with him. Tom watched her from the doorway, his expression gentle. It's hard letting go. Yes, she agreed, turning to face him, but necessary sometimes, to make room for what comes next. Something flickered in his eyes, hope, perhaps, or understanding. He stepped forward, taking the bundle of belongings from her arms. Whatever comes next, he said quietly, you won't face it alone, not unless you want to. They returned to Tom's ranch, their ranch now, in a way neither of them had put into words yet. The marshal in Gila Bend agreed to handle the sale of Jessie's property, and life settled into a new pattern, one that felt increasingly right to both of them. Summer faded into autumn. Elizabeth grew stronger every day, her personality emerging stubborn like her mother, observant like her adoptive father. For that was what Tom had become, though no vows had been spoken. He carved a cradle for her, placed it in the main room where they spent their evenings, and delighted in each of her small achievements, her first real smile, the way she began to focus on his face when he spoke to her. One crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Tom cleared his throat nervously. I've been thinking, he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Jessie looked at him, curious about this rare uncertainty. About us, he gestured vaguely between them. This arrangement, it's been good, I think, for both of us and for Elizabeth. It has, Jessie agreed, her heart beginning to beat faster. Tom shifted in his chair, his hands restless in his lap. The thing is, Jessie, I find myself. That is, I've come to. He sighed in frustration at his own inarticulateness. Tom, she said gently, reaching over to touch his arm, just say what's on your mind. He met her eyes then, and the emotion she saw there took her breath away. I love you, he said simply, both of you. And I want us to be a real family, proper and legal. Joy flooded through her, warm and bright as the sunset before them. Are you asking me to marry you, Thomas Everett? A smile broke across his face, transforming his weathered features. I suppose I am, not very elegantly, but yes. Jessie moved from her chair to kneel before him, taking his rough hands in hers. I love you too, she whispered. You saved more than just Elizabeth's life that day. You saved mine as well. Tom leaned forward, cupping her face with gentle hands, and kissed her for the first time, a tender, questioning kiss that deepened as she responded with all the love that had been building in her heart over the past months. When they finally drew apart, Tom rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? Jessie laughed, a sound of pure happiness. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Gila Bend, Elizabeth cradled in the arms of the marshal's wife who had become a friend to Jessie. The ceremony was simple, attended by the few townsfolk who had come to know them, but the joy that filled the little church was anything but small. "I, Thomas, take thee, Jessica." Tom's voice rang clear and sure as he spoke his vows, his eyes never leaving hers. When he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, Jessie felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. That night, after they had put Elizabeth to bed in her cradle, now moved to the small room adjacent to theirs that Tom had built during their engagement, they came together as husband and wife. Their lovemaking was tender at first, both of them hesitant, but soon gave way to a passion that surprised them in its intensity. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Jessie traced the scars that marked Tom's chest, testaments to the dangerous life he had led before her. "I never thought I'd find this again," he murmured, his fingers tangled in her hair. "After Sarah died, I was certain that part of my life was over." "I felt the same after James," Jessie admitted. "Especially once I realized I was carrying Elizabeth, I thought we would be alone forever." Tom kissed her forehead. "Not anymore, not ever again." Life settled into a rhythm after their marriage, days filled with work and evenings filled with family. Tom expanded the ranch, adding more cattle and hiring 2 hands to help with the increasing workload. Jessie started a vegetable garden and acquired chickens, making their home more self-sufficient. Elizabeth thrived under their care, growing from an infant to a toddler who delighted in exploring the world around her. She followed Tom everywhere when he was home, perched on his shoulders as he checked the fences or sitting solemnly beside him as he repaired tack in the evenings. "Da," was her first word, pointing imperiously at Tom one morning at breakfast. His face had lit up with such joy that Jessie felt tears spring to her eyes. "That's right, little one," he'd said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm your Da." When Elizabeth was 18 months old, Jessie discovered she was expecting again. She told Tom on a warm spring evening as they sat on the porch, Elizabeth already asleep inside. "A baby," he repeated, his expression stunned. "Our baby? Due in November," Jessie confirmed, watching his face anxiously. They hadn't discussed having more children, though they hadn't taken precautions against it either. A slow smile spread across Tom's face, and he pulled her into his lap, heedless of the possibility of neighbors seeing. "Another child," he whispered against her hair. "Our family is growing." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with Jessie blooming under Tom's attentive care. He insisted on hiring a woman from town to help with the heavier household work, despite Jessie's protests that she was perfectly capable. "You're carrying my child," he said firmly. "You'll rest when you need to." As her belly swelled, Elizabeth became fascinated with the changes in her mother's body, patting the bump and babbling to her unborn sibling. Tom would often find them like this, Jessie in the rocking chair he'd made for her, Elizabeth pressed against her side, both of them singing nonsense songs to the baby. In those moments, watching his family without their knowledge, Tom felt a contentment he had never thought to experience again. The wounds of his past had not disappeared, but they had healed into scars that no longer pained him daily. Their son was born on a cold November night, with the help of the midwife from Gila Bend and Tom pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door. When the first cries pierced the air, he sagged against the wall in relief. "You can come in now," the midwife called, and Tom entered to find Jessie propped against the pillows, a tiny bundle in her arms. "We have a son," she said, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. "Come meet him." Tom approached the bed with reverence, carefully taking the swaddled infant when Jessie offered him. The baby stared up at him with unfocused eyes, his tiny fist escaping the blanket to wave in the air. "Hello, little man," Tom whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome to the world." "I thought we might call him James," Jessie said softly, "after his grandfather." Tom looked at her in surprise. "You want to name him after your first husband? And your middle name," Jessie reminded him with a smile. "James Thomas Everett, a name to honor the past while looking to the future." Tom's throat tightened with emotion. "It's perfect," he managed, leaning down to kiss her gently. "He's perfect, you're perfect. Not perfect, Jessie corrected him with a tired laugh. Just happy, so very happy. Elizabeth was enchanted with her baby brother, though sometimes jealous of the attention he required. Tom made sure to spend extra time with her, taking her on short rides around the ranch and teaching her the names of the wildflowers that bloomed in the desert spring. "She has your spirit," he told Jessie one evening as they watched Elizabeth determinedly stacking blocks, knocking them down, and starting over without frustration. "Never gives up. And your patience," Jessie replied, nursing James as she spoke. "I was never so methodical as a child." As the years passed, their family continued to grow and strengthen. They added a daughter, Sarah, named after Tom's first wife, a gesture that had moved him to tears when Jessie suggested it. "She was part of what made you the man I love," Jessie had explained. "She deserves to be remembered." The ranch prospered under Tom's careful management, expanding to become one of the most successful in the area. Jessie started a small school in one of the outbuildings, teaching their children and those of neighboring ranchers. On the 5th anniversary of the day the Bandits had taken Elizabeth, Tom and Jessie rode out alone to the spot where he had fulfilled his promise, where those men had indeed seen their last sunrise. They hadn't spoken of that day often, preferring to focus on the life they had built rather than the violence that had brought them together. "Sometimes I think about how different things might have been," Jessie said as they sat their horses side by side, "if they hadn't come that night. If you hadn't found me on the trail." Tom reached across to take her hand. "I believe we would have found each other somehow," he said quietly. "Some things are meant to be. A bounty hunter and a widow with a newborn." Jessie smiled. "It's not the most likely match, maybe not," Tom agreed. "But it's ours, and I wouldn't change a minute of it." As they rode home in the gathering dusk, Jessie looked over at the man who had become the center of her world. Thomas Everett was still not a conventionally handsome man. The years had added more lines to his face, and gray now streaked his dark hair, but to her, he was beautiful. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze. "That I'm grateful," she replied simply. "For everything that brought us here, even the painful parts," Tom nodded, understanding in his eyes. "As am I." They crested the final rise before their ranch came into view, the expanded cabin, now a proper house, the barns and corrals, the garden Jessie had cultivated over the years. Smoke rose from the chimney where their oldest daughter was likely helping the housekeeper prepare dinner. "Race you home," Jessie challenged with a grin, already urging her horse forward. Tom laughed, the sound carrying on the clear desert air as he spurred his mount after her. "Always," he called. They thundered down the slope together, side by side, toward the life they had built from tragedy and hope, from a desperate meeting on a lonely trail and a whispered promise of justice. Behind them, the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire, a reminder of endings that had become beginnings, and of love that had bloomed in the harshest of circumstances. When they reached the yard, their children spilled from the house, drawn by the sound of approaching hooves. Elizabeth, now a spirited young girl with her mother's determination and her adoptive father's steady gaze. James, sturdy and serious beyond his years. Sarah, the baby still, with her father's dark hair and her mother's laughing eyes. Tom swung down from his horse and lifted Elizabeth high in the air, her delighted squeal carrying across the ranch. Jessie gathered the younger two in her arms, her heart full to bursting with the life they had created together. Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet around them, Tom took Jessie in his arms as they stood on the porch beneath a canopy of stars. "Happy?" he asked, the question a ritual between them now. "Completely," she answered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "And you?" Tom smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face into something boyish and carefree. "More than I ever thought possible." As they stood together in the peaceful darkness, Jessie thought of that terrible night when bandits had torn her child from her arms, and of the man who had promised retribution. They had indeed seen their last sunrise, as Tom had vowed. But what neither of them could have known then was how many beautiful sunrises lay ahead for the family they would become. "I love you, Thomas Everett," she whispered against his chest, his arms tightened around her. And I love you, Jessie Bennett Everett, until my last breath." Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were protected and cherished. Outside, the desert stretched vast and endless under the star-filled sky, a reminder of the wilderness that had brought their parents together and the strength they had found in each other. From the darkest moment of Jessie's life had come her greatest joy, a family built on courage and compassion, on promises kept and love freely given. In Thomas Everett, she had found not just a savior but a partner, not just safety but belonging. And as they stood together under the Arizona stars, they were both certain of one simple truth. Some journeys, no matter how painful their beginning, lead exactly where you're meant to be.